again. Myakka Chopper here. You've probably seen some of my other videos. Some of them are just fun videos where I write crazy songs and make crazy videos and entertain myself, and maybe if you get a laugh out of it, then that's all that much better. And other videos I've made are really serious regarding HAARP and UFOs and some paranormal experiences that I've personally had myself that has led me to this idea now that I'm on a destined path, and I'm following a path of destiny regarding the end of the world and these other situations. However, this one's not as serious as those, and this one probably has nothing to do in relevance to those other than the fact that it's another unique occasion that I've had the opportunity to witness. So let's go on to the events of 9/11, September 2001. I was lucky enough or destined enough to be off work that day, so I was able to witness the events on the news firsthand as they unfolded. Now, I was here watching, I wasn't doing anything till my wife called. She said, "Hurry up, turn on the TV. Somebody crashed a plane into the World Trade Center." And about a month before, somebody had crashed a Cessna into the Empire State Building, and I just assumed it was something along those lines, and not a real big news, but it would be interesting. So I flipped over to CNN, I think it was. They were carrying out, they showed the footage. The tower was up there with some smoke coming out of it and a hole, and I'm like, oh yeah, something happened, but I already missed it. And then all of a sudden I see this plane coming in, and I'm like, oh, here we go, they're going to show a replay of it. But it's not making sense to me at the time, but it turns out that that was the second plane as it made impact into the other building of the World Trade Center. And so I watched that go on, and then I watched them. They'd break away to President Bush, and he'd be with the kids, and a guy would come in and he whispered in his ear, and then the guy left, and then a little bit later the guy came back in and probably told him, hey dude, this is some serious stuff, you gotta go now, we're going to DEFCON 5, we're moving you out, because you gotta protect the president. And I don't know if they heard anything that maybe somebody was coming to get the president or whatnot. But, you recently had the plane hit the Pentagon, and you had the plane hit the World Trade Center. Supposedly a plane, 103, I think, 103 was over Lockheed Scotland. 93, Flight 93, my mistake, was on its way to the White House, supposedly, to hit there. And they suspect that maybe, possibly, there could have been other planes. So they grounded all the planes early on. And that really turned out to be a clever move. Now, as I watched the president, because we watched the emergency motorcade, the news had a little bit about the emergency motorcade going out and stuff, and then they showed the president getting on the plane and taking off. And I'll tell you, I watched the president's plane take off. The number one thing I can tell you is they did not taxi to any runway and take off. They took off straight from the tarmac on a taxiway. They were on the tarmac and went straight down the taxiway and took off right off the taxiway. Not only that, they took off full throttle. They took off with enough force and energy from their plane to melt the asphalt on the taxiway, making it unusable and having to have it repaired before they were able to use that taxiway again. Now, that's pretty interesting in itself, but why did they leave so quickly? It's to speculate. Who knows? It was a threat to America. You got to make the president safe. Now, that in itself is bad enough, but I got to tell you, I watched the news relentlessly for the next couple days, just like the rest of the world did. But here in Florida, our news probably is a little different. Maybe, I don't know, because I'd break away from MSNBC to Fox News to our local carriers here, flipping all around. And during one point of the day, I come across a segment where there was a airplane over on the east coast of Florida. It was a little blurb. They come on, so there was an airplane found on the east coast of Florida full of explosives, and a SWAT team was storming it. And then, they cut away to something else, and I never heard anything about it, but I continually watched for more information regarding that, because that was, in Florida, and it was pretty unique, this plane full of explosives. What would they do with something like that? And like I said, I saw this on the news. It was reported. But I never gave much thought because I never saw anything more about it. My wife was off the next day. She came home around 7:30, 8 o'clock that night. We've continued to watch the news continuously until we slept. But then we got up early and watched the news all day the next day, and like most of the world did. Now, never heard nothing more about this plane full of explosives that was on the east coast of Florida. Now, coincidentally, I would have probably not ever given it much thought, but probably about a month or so after that, I was talking with my son-in-law, and we were discussing some of the events, and he had told me that him and some of the Secret Service guys that were on detail down here had kind of kept in communications with each other. You know, it was like, I bet probably a few of them did, because of the nature of the day probably brought a lot of people pretty close together that would have probably not otherwise really talked much at all. But so anyway, he had told me that after talking with his Secret Service friend buddy, the Secret Service guy had told him that they had discovered an airplane on the Daytona Beach airport on the runway getting ready to take off that was stopped because of the closing of the airports, and they were able to storm it, and it was filled with terrorists and explosives, and they were going to be flying to the Sarasota Bradenton airport. Their intentions were to fly to the Sarasota Bradenton airport and blow up the president in that plan as part of the attacks of the day of September 11th. But it was stopped. It was thwarted because we were lucky enough to have had the good sense to close down the airports to prevent any other airplanes from taking off, because they're only a couple hours away from Sarasota by air, you know, not even that probably. So they hadn't taken off yet when the other planes had already done their crashing. Interestingly enough, though, you know, I never ever heard any more about the plane on the news with the explosives, but coincidentally is on the east coast of Florida, which is probably around Daytona Beach, and it's really probably the plane that the Secret Service guy was telling my son-in-law about. Well, what that really means, I really don't know, and I don't even want to speculate on it. I mean, I don't know about any 9/11 conspiracies, and I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but I think it's pretty unusual that I think that occurred. The president's plane probably almost got attacked right here locally in Sarasota, Florida, and we probably just, for some reason, were kept in the dark about it. Anytime they keep information from me, it makes me wonder, what's the reason, you know? I mean, generally in a situation like that, you're going to want to come out and say, you know what, yeah, we found these guys, they were going to blow up the president's plane, we kicked their ass, you know what I'm saying? And whenever they just don't say nothing about it, they never hear anything about it again, it makes you wonder, what's there to hide about that? I don't know. I don't know if there's anything to hide about that. Like I said, I can't say for sure how true the story is, but I'm presenting you to the story exactly as I experienced it, exactly as it happened, exactly as I witnessed, and exactly as I communicated with my son-in-law. And I don't believe that, he's a long-standing, he was long-standing in the city police. I don't think he had any reason to lie or make any of that information up. And at the time, he didn't know what I had saw on TV. And when we talked together, we were both like, wow, you know, that's probably what it was, you know, that's probably the same plane. So regardless, it's an interesting day in my predestined life, apparently. And I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about it, because that's my personal first-hand experience here from Sarasota, Florida, and what I know about it. So maybe other people might get out there, they might have a little knowledge to add to it. So post your comments if you have anything you want to add or something, because really I think YouTube is a wonderful learning tool. It's not just for entertainment. I've discovered that it's like a really powerful tool to reach people that may have not otherwise been able to communicate their ideas. Just like my UFO thing, you know, I never thought I'd ever find anybody I could tell it to. You know, when Discovery aired that program about it, I tried to get on and send them an email and everything, but I don't think anything ever came of it. But I put it on here on YouTube too, but a lot of people have watched it. Some people thought I was a bad actor, and let me assure you, I'm not acting. I'm telling you the truth as I experienced it. And I have nothing to gain either way, other than the fact that I hope you research this information and you learn for yourself, because there's some important things going on out there, and eventually we're all going to need to know it and understand it. I'm out of time.